Welcome, everyone. Welcome, future lawyers, to this BarMax webinar, Retake or Take a Break. I'm Celeste Pagano-Bowles, and I am the Director of Content and Instruction here at BarMax. And I am joined today by my colleague, Jennifer Carr. Jennifer, if people are here today, they're going through a lot.
Probably, I would imagine that nobody is here because their things are going as they expected.
Right, exactly. So anyway, Jennifer, you will be coming back later and really helping them with the next steps, which is great. But in the meantime, I just did want to begin by acknowledging that it's a time of year when we hear exciting news. We see that our students have passed or they've overcome so much, but we also hear from people who are devastated because they have not passed the bar exam. So if you are somewhere in there, it is okay that you might be feeling, fed up at these bar examiners. I like that one, fed up. No, come on. You might be just feeling flat out miserable. You might feel a little bit lonely if some of your cohort in law school has passed, but you are not alone. At the moment, there are 75 people in this particular webinar, and we've watched so many students go through it and need to pass the bar only after multiple attempts. So it is not required that you be cheerful or happy or excited about this prospect today, but we do want to get you to the point, doesn't even have to be today, but where you feel hopeful, and you know that you can do it going forward. So we're here today, not as your therapist, but to acknowledge that the emotions are a real part of it, that it's awful news to get because you all achieved a bunch of legal education and you all worked really hard. So I just want to say right off, I know that what you're going through isn't easy. So from there, I am just launching into our agenda here. I'm going to talk about, the main thing I'm going to talk about, honestly, is how to analyze your score report. Because you got a piece of paper in the mail, or more likely attached to an email, an attachment on an email, or downloaded from your bar portal website that had a bunch of numbers on it. And what do those numbers mean really? How close are you to passing? What were your strengths and weaknesses? So we're going to look at a few sample score reports and talk about what indications we can pick up from those. When we're also going to acknowledge that the factors that go into that decision aren't just your score report, how you did this time. They're also the trajectory of how you're doing overall, what's going on in your life, your mental health, your physical health sometimes, and your family and work obligations, how much time you're going to need to study, and how much time, mental space, and energy you want to devote right now. So those factors are going to go into deciding whether to retake the exam coming up here in July of 2023, or whether to take a break and come back in the fall for February. Then Jennifer is going to get to the really useful practical stuff of assessing what went wrong, maybe through your study process, maybe exam week, and what to do next time, particularly the tried and true BarMax study strategies that have been successful for so many people. She's going to give you an overview of those. And BarMax, as many of you know, is a bar prep program we have for each subject. This isn't the course. That's the MBE questions page. But for each subject that we go through in the course, this is the UBE course right here. Today, we're talking primarily to UBE students, but this part of the course applies to MBE students as well. When we get to a section, you'll see that there is a lecture segment, some flashcards, and a set of MBE questions that deal specifically with that section. Some of them are short. Privacy and nuisance here is only 20 minutes of lecture. Some of them are long. I just flashed negligence, one of the most tested subjects in the course, about an hour and a half. So that is kind of the core part of the course. But you also get with BarMax every MBE question that is licensed and out there to be used, real MBE questions from past exams. They're here on the MBE questions page. I'm in the app right now. It's also very nicely navigable on the new user interface of our website, which actually, Katie, can you drop a link to that in the chat? The testmaxprep.com/bar-exam is our website. So you might want to see what the program looks like there. You also get access to every past essay question and every past performance test. So this is what comes with BarMax. You get access to all of them, both on the webpage and as a downloadable welcome packet in PDFs. And finally, this video, along with many other videos, are available, will be available. This one will be available. And all of our past videos are available on this office hours page. We have videos about our about some topics like dormant commerce clause over here on the right, or my crazy looking mind map of secured transactions. But we also have office hours about our strategies, like Jennifer teaching you how to get ready for test day, or me teaching our classic open book bar exam study webinar over there on the right with the passive and active study chart to teach you how to make the best use, the most efficient use of the time that you do have to study. So all of these resources are kind of available as an add-on to BarMax. They can be overwhelming. So if you want to know what you need, you can always write to support and say, hey, this is where I'm stuck, or this is my question. And support can usually answer your question, or if it's specific content, they'll bump it over to me and the content team, and we'll answer that question for you. We also have tutoring from really excellent tutors. Jennifer is one of our tutors. She's a law professor as well as a tutor, and she was even the dean of academic support at a law school for some time. And so she has tons of experience in helping people pass the bar. We have other tutors, who do various things, some in legal education, some in the law, who are share the passion for helping students pass the bar and who are great teachers. So I'm very proud of our select group of tutors, and they are available. So those are things we have to offer. Let's get into the decision we talked about today: retake or take a break. And I think of these sort of as performance things, both how did you perform on the exam itself? How close was your score? What can we learn from that score? And what study methods did you use? If you studied inefficiently in ways that you're going to find out from Jen are not the most effective, even though they're very common ways to study, then you have a chance to potentially make up a lot of ground just by shifting your study methods. So that is something for you to consider. Is July within reach for me? And if I realize, man, I blew it big time in my study method, or I didn't devote enough time, but now I can, then July is looking better for you, right? You also have to consider life considerations, and we'll talk a little bit about those, but burnout is real, okay? And these other factors that can come up in your life. But I said that I would get into the practical. So let's look at some score reports. This is a score report from Utah. So let's look at this person's score, shall we? This one how they lay out the score report is different state to state. So I'm showing you 3 different layouts, and we'll actually do 2 full score reports from New York. So buckle up. One thing you will all see if you took a UBE exam is a UBE total score. Okay. Now in Utah, this person needs 270 to pass. The required passing score on the UBE varies state to state, anywhere from 260 to 276 in Colorado. It used to be 280 in Alaska, but they came down to earth, apparently, with this administration's bar exam, and dropped it to 270 to be in line with Texas and, well, here Utah and several other states. So a lot of states like New York are 266. There's a lot of states around 270. So know what your jurisdiction requires. Also, you're probably aware of this, but if you didn't make your jurisdiction score, but you did make 260 or above, you should be able to transfer your score to a different jurisdiction if that helps you. That helps people who do things like immigration law or Social Security law, where it is federal law that you're practicing, bankruptcy. There are some areas of law where you can still practice even if you're not barred in the jurisdiction you're sitting in. You might want to look into that if you are in that 260 to whatever range. So this person has 6 points to go. Pretty solid performance, but needs a little bit of a boost. Okay. So let's break it down. Some jurisdictions only give you 2 numbers, that total number and the MBE number. Now, Utah gave us some more numbers here. We'll go over them. But if you know that and you know how to subtract, then you know your written score number, because the MBE score plus the written scaled score, that equals your total UBE score. So if they only gave you the 2 that I've highlighted here in yellow, then just subtract, and that's your written score. So here, 264 minus 136 is 128 for this student. Obviously, this student did better on the MBE. In fact, if they were going to get their points 50-50 from both sides of the exam, this person would have passed with that 135 or above MBE. But they didn't do quite as well in the writing. So now let's analyze that writing score. Okay, this is a state that grades on a 1 to 6 scale for the essays, the raw score for the essays. And these right here, let's get a different color. How about bright green? It's springtime here where I live. Let's go bright green. These are the scores on the 6 essays. For the Utah report, they were actually kind of written across. It was weird, but I had to type them. So I put them like this. So this one was at the passing level, 4. That means this is a satisfactory essay. Okay, it's not a great essay. A great essay would be 5, or stellar essay would be 6. But it was a solid, did what it needed to do, passing essay. But I want you to see that the other 5 essay questions, and these are, the MEE, fact pattern, answer the question, IRAC, okay, those are all below passing. So I would want this student to work more on their writing. And I would have another additional question for this student. Because here, this was very interesting to me. These are this student's MPT scores. Those are both passing. In fact, I would say that they're getting a 4 on both MBEs, yay. Okay, that's their hair blowing around. Okay, a 4 on both MPTs is great. That tells me MPT is challenging for some people, but for people who tend to do well on it, when I was a private tutor, I had a student who came to me after failing the bar, even though he had gotten a 6 out of 6 on one of his MPTs. So for both of these candidates, it tells me they're good at learning, processing, absorbing, organizing information quickly. So if they can learn, absorb, process, organize, and then you have to write pretty well to get a 4. If they can do all that, why did they not pass 5 of their 6 MEE questions. My guess for this person is going to be rule memorization. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I'm looking at that score, this is someone who knows how to write. They're struggling with knowledge. And my guess is that if they just focus a little bit on memorization, they're going to see those essay scores go up. But I also think they'll even get a little bit more wiggle room on their MBE.
I completely agree, because some of the MBE, again, like you get used to seeing the same fact patterns over and over. But if you've really memorized the rules, then you catch that exception to the exception, and your MBE score will go up. So the thing I would ask this person to do is work more on memorization, and maybe they didn't review a whole lot of essays because they felt like, I'm a good writer. I don't have to review a whole lot of essays. Yes, you do. And the reason why is they like to test the same fact patterns and issues over and over again, especially in those non-MBE subjects, especially secure transactions, but also wills, agency and partnerships. There are certain fact patterns that you will see again and again. In fact, in conflicts of law, there's really only maybe 3 things that they test, in conflict of laws. So you want to look at a lot of essays in those areas in order to be able to nail them. Your secure transactions essay, if there is one on your exam, should be a 6. It should be a 6 every time because they're incredibly formulaic. Take the time to learn how to do it. There's a lot less to know in each of those subjects than there is in, say, constitutional law, where there's a lot more doctrine, or criminal law and procedure, a lot more doctrine. So you want to make sure that you go through a lot of essays to see the frequently tested issues, even if you don't write out all those essays. But do write out some of them. When I was showing off all the features of BarMax, I forgot to mention that we also have an essay submission portal through the website, where if you have a BarMax program, you get to submit 10 essays. I recommend that people submit them early, submit a couple early to make sure that your writing format, your IRAC, that what they're looking for to give you points on the exam, make sure that's dialed in. But then I want you to do timed essays and timed MPTs later. This person won't need a lot of MPTs, but they should do some timed essays to get used to that feeling of, this one, I don't know the rule. So how do I write a coherent essay when I have to make up the rule? Jen did a whole office hour on that. It was terrific. Anyway, that's a lot to get out of this one score report that's nearly passing anyway. So let me move on to another student score. All right, this is a student from Ohio. Also requires, it says this at the bottom of the Ohio score report, also requires a 270. These are from past bar exams. This is not somebody who just sent me their score this week and their heart is bleeding while they're watching me here. Okay, here is someone else who got a fairly solid score, but this time a little bit lower. Okay, a 251. This person has a way to go to make up 19 points to get to the, I would want my first person to go for it. Unless their life is completely a wreck, I want them to maintain the momentum that they've had up until now and go for it. Memorize some more rules and go ahead and get that 270 or above next time, probably above, because they're going to tighten it up. This person here, I want them to evaluate. How much time do I study? What methods did I use? And how much time do I have to study now? Say, well, I got 13 weeks between now and the exam. That's when we're going to talk about the life factors. Are you taking care of kids? Are you working a full-time job? That either or both of those things is going to make it harder for you to make up that kind of ground in 13 weeks. So we may have an alternate plan for you. I'm sorry, I did this to the state of Ohio. I've seen it both ways, scaled score and scale score, but it bothers me, so I stick them. I also didn't like that they didn't pass our student. Anyway, so this person has more ground to make up. Looking at it on a more, fine grain level, let's zoom in on this MBE score. Okay, they need 135 on the MBE. Well, they don't need it. They need it they need the two scores to average 135 because they need it to add up to 270. But this person here only got 122, rounding up, let's call it 122 on the MBE. And that's concerning, okay? So I want to figure out not just subject area knowledge, but how are you tackling those MBE questions? Are you using the open book active study method that Jen's going to show you? And if you are and still not clicking, still not getting it, that's where that BarMax tutoring is going to come in, okay? So going through a lot of essays for the content, I should have pulled one up, but the essays come with a really detailed explanation from NCBE, so you can learn the doctrine. All the doctrine you need in terms of, condensed black letter law is in our outlines. But to see how it applies on those essays, some people find those NCBE explanations helpful, so we provide you with all of them. And we also provide sample answers from the past 10 years. Anyway, over here, we see, again, we have a couple of passing scores. Okay, so this person is probably I'm sorry, we got one really high score right here. We got a 5. This is a superior essay. This is a subject the student probably knows well, or a topic within that subject that the student studied hard and knows well, and they were able to write a great essay on it. So that's really good news right there, because I see the writing ability, but the overall writing score didn't get where it needed to be. So we probably want more practice, more subject level knowledge. And with this MBE score, this student has to consider their time commitments, and make sure that they can devote what it takes. Would you agree with that one pretty much, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like, so this person has got a 5, a 4, and a 4, but then they've also got 2 2s. That's going to tell me this is someone, when they know the material, they're going to do fine. But when they don't know the material, they struggle. Mm-hmm. And that's also demonstrated in their MBE score, because they've got, this relatively lower MBE score, which would suggest a lack of subject matter knowledge.
Right. So some gaps, some areas where they learned everything they needed to know and some where they didn't. That probably shows exactly that. Okay, so here is one of our New York reports. This person scored kind of in between my other 2 people. Again, a very solid score, and they only needed 266 to pass in New York. That's what we're aiming for New York. And you're going to see this looks very different. So they're only 7 points off. Okay, so we got to figure out where are we going to make up those points for this person here. It looks very different than the other ones because it's got all this stuff down here, right? We have what we were talking about before, a total score, a written score, an MBE score, and we also have these weird numbers. We've been talking 1 to 6, or in some cases, 0 to 7 up until now. And on those scales, your 4+ is your passing essay, right? What is all this gobbledygook over here? Let's talk to you, New York. If you are at a 50+, that's the same as being a 4 in Ohio or, these other states. So a 50+ is where we want to be, 50 being that adequate essay. And again, what do we see here? We see a passing essay, a really good essay. I would say these 2 are great, okay? Because they're 56 basically. That's great for a New York essay. And then we see 2 essays and, one slightly below the passing line here and one a little lower than that, and had a problem with MPTs. Here we see the problem is on the writing side of the score, the problem is chiefly with the MPTs. MPT is not something most people should overlook. Everyone should do at least some timed practice. It surprises people, especially people who come in, like maybe they've been a practicing lawyer in another country or another state, and they think, oh, I know how to do this. I do these all day long. And, no, because at a law firm or at your job or working for the government or whatever you're doing, or even when you were in law school doing assignments that you excelled at, You took your time to make sure that you wrote a decent draft. You gave yourself some time to sleep on it. You went through, you did revisions, you turned in something beautiful. Even in law practice, you're going to leave it on your desk overnight and proofread it in the morning. No matter what kind of deadline you're on, you're hoping to at least, give it a fresh pair of eyes. They want you to do an assignment that any competent lawyer would devote at least 4 hours to in 90 minutes. Okay, they are not asking you to be a competent lawyer. They are asking you to complete their little exercise of showing that you can, hit all the points and write something adequately coherent that gets through the whole thing in 90 minutes. So one resource we have within BarMax that would help this person, we have a lot of office hours, and several of us have taught different methods for approaching the MPT, because how you take the MPT is in part dependent on how your brain works. But I will say that Lavanya's method, she's another former law professor on the BarMax instructional staff, has been really helpful, and some students called it a game changer for them. She did a workshop. It's within our office hours. She took the February 2011 MPT called Butler v. Hill. So I always recommend that people read this first if they're going to go watch that. And she, read this first so you know what she's talking about. And then she goes through and she shows her whole method. It's very different from mine, where I tell people, hey, it takes about 45 minutes to outline, 45 minutes to write. She is creating and writing as she goes along. She creates this outline / draft that she calls the Bride of Frankenstein. And she does not turn it into, a beautiful model. She turns it into Frankenstein, or no, she calls it the Frankenstein draft and turns it into the Bride of Frankenstein, just a little better looking than Frankenstein, the monster, the original monster himself, right? So it's a little entertaining, but it's very helpful. It helps you to just kind of know where to plop the pieces of the information they give you so that you can organize in a coherent fashion. And then you spend the last part of your time smoothing out the writing and putting it so that it's in lawyer English or close to it, whatever you can achieve in 90 minutes. So I would recommend that this person try that method, and maybe twice. And if that method doesn't work, try another method. There's another instructor named Whitney who has a very streamlined method. Again, you can write to support and say, hey, I'm having trouble here, or meet with a tutor, work through some MPTs with a tutor. I want this person to overcome their deficit here in the MPT so that they can get these, up averaging at 50 or above, because MPTs are weighted more heavily than essays. So do well in the MPT, it's worth it. So New York gives us a little bit more information about the MBE. And people get really confused about this information. What do these percents mean? This is not the percentage of questions that you got correct. This is your percentile nationally. So when they say percent below nationally, they mean the percent of people in the country who scored worse than you did or lower than you did in that particular subject. This person is a rock star in civil procedure. No doubt about it. They scored in almost the top third of the country. And, think about it. More than half the people usually pass the bar. Depending. So if you're in the top half of the country, you're probably passing, right? This person scored, so that they were, in the top 37% of the country. I had to just subtract there with that 63 from 100. But we jump down here to evidence. Only 14.3% of the people in the country scored lower than this student did in evidence. This is a real concern, okay? Evidence is an area where they're going to need to go over more problems, go over more essays, and possibly get some tutoring to figure out what they're missing. Matthias did an office hour that kind of gave a big picture of evidence so that, you can get a conceptual idea of what it's about. And a new instructor, yet another law professor named Greg, is going to be covering hearsay for us in an office hour this term. So that is an area where I want the person to focus. But at the same time, I don't want this person to say, well, I did well here and here and here, so I'm just not going to study civil procedure, contracts, and criminal law this time because I already know them. Because we have seen people make that decision and then their scores flip. Suddenly they get really good at evidence, but they bomb contracts. We have seen it happen and it's heartbreaking. Why would this happen if they already know contracts? Because this exam makes you memorize an insane, crazy, infuriating amount of stuff, right? And so if you're going to do that, you have to cram it in your head again in the weeks and months leading up to the bar, but especially those last few weeks before the bar. You want to take the areas where you were strong before and keep running through questions to make sure you still know them. Okay. So any more comments on this one, Jen, on our first New Yorker?
No, I don't think so. I think you nailed it. I mean, I think 100% right too, that people underestimate that MPT, which, you know, you got to do it, and you got to do enough that you feel comfortable with it. And no, just because you've done an externship or you're practicing in another state, it is not the same thing, because it's still bar exam writing. It's just bar exam writing on the MPT. Okay, great advice. All right, I have another New Yorker here. And again, this was my Ohio person. Okay, sorry, I put them in twice. Okay, I have another New Yorker here, and this time I am much more concerned about this score. Okay. This is a score that is more toward the bottom 5% nationally. And I need to be blunt about that. It's easy to make up some ground by changing your study methods and by doing the things that we have said are going to help these other students. One of them needed more memorization. One of them needed more MPT practice. One of them might need to tweak their MBE study method. This person's going to need all of it, some of all of it. They scored passing on one essay. Interestingly, oh no, that was a different year. Okay. I was like, is that the same essay that other person nailed? It was a different year. So, and they scored pretty well in constitutional law. I wonder if this is a constitutional law essay. I don't know. But that doesn't mean that they're where they need to be. Okay. They're going to need to employ the study methods that Jen recommended. They're probably going to want to take advantage of some tutoring and give themselves more time to study. Now, I meant to give this to you, Katie. I want to drop into chat later on something we call the extended study plan. We have created this recently within BarMax, and the one that I'm going to post was for this July exam. And so the extended people would have started at the beginning of April. Actually, you can start earlier. It's a 4 to 6 month plan. So if you say, okay, I didn't realize what I was getting into and I need to devote more time to this, and I'm going to set up my life so that I can make sure I can study enough, then you're going to want to start sometime between early September and the end of October and walk through that extended study plan. So I'm seeing that there are some questions. Let me see. Oh, okay. So it's about scaling. Scaling is a mathematical process that they go through to equalize the scores. And Jen promises that she will explain a little more about it. And for that, I am grateful. Jen, not that either one of us is a mathematician. And in terms of the people who've asked specific advice about their score, I feel like I've given some general principles here, and we may, what do you think? We'll just circle back at the end and talk about a little bit of those. Okay, so we know this person needs more work. What else can you New Yorkers do? These essays are available to you if you are in a state that allows you to do it. About half of them allow it and about half of them don't.
order your essays. Find out from your bar. In New York, it's actually the first page of this letter. People just jump to the second page of the letter because it has all the numbers on it. But the first page of the letter tells you how to order your essays. Some states require you to use snail mail, I think, and others you can just download it from the state bar exam portal, and you can actually look at the bar exam essays that you wrote. You can look at those with a BarMax tutor if you would like, and go through and figure out, okay, on a big picture, what's going on here on the essays. Or even if it's just, aha, yeah, it turns out this was con law and I knew it really well, and I need to bone up my knowledge in other subjects. You can learn something by looking at your essays, but you can certainly learn something by looking at your essays with an instructor, with someone helping you out. So those are the score reports I wanted to look at. As I said, your performance considerations are how close was my score. So we saw, one of those people, I was just like, oh, go for it, and another one, I said, hey, take more time. And the other two were in the middle. So for those people, you're going to have to think about other factors as well. In your performance, I want you to think about, was I using the most efficient and effective study methods, the one that Jen is teaching us today? And did I devote enough time to studying? And then the corollary to that, can I? Now, there are people who come to us, and I mentioned, parents, working people. And I had one, you could go read her testimonial. She posted it somewhere recently, passed the bar exam recently, who was a foreign lawyer, a Canadian lawyer, and a single mom and working and on a tight budget. And she studied when she could study and made it as efficient as possible. And she touched base with me from time to time about, okay, what should I be studying, or how should I, not freaking out about a low score on a practice exam, but figuring out what to do instead. So we were in touch through support from time to time. And so I was delighted to hear that this student passed, because she did have a lot going on. She didn't have all of the time in the world to study. But if you are on the lower end of the score range, you're going to know that you will need to find that time, even if you have to spread it out over 6 months. So you're going to consider your obligations, like, do I have to be working full time right now? Do I have family? I had one student who was trying to pass the bar while taking care of a dying family member. That was too much to put on themselves all at that one time, I think. And if you take the bar too many times in a row, this happens. Even if your score is close, if you got that score twice in a row and you don't want to look at the books and you just want to throw them out the window, you might need a break, just for a mental break, because you're spinning your wheels and driving yourself crazy. And that's okay to say, I don't want to look at this stuff, and I'll look at it in, October, November, for February. If you know that, you're pretty close, but you can't stand it right now. The other thing to consider is your own health. I had one friend who took the bar. She's my age, and so she took the bar a few years ago, and I guess she would have been in her late 40s then. And she said the hardest part about this whole process is sitting in a chair for 7 hours a day. Like, our backs aren't designed for that anymore. So even just taking the exam takes a toll on our health. And you may have other health challenges that you're dealing with. And I've certainly counseled students who've been going through quite serious health challenges. So you have to figure out how to, when are you going to take care of yourself, and should the bar wait for later? And then sometimes people have things, whether physical or mental disabilities, that impact their bar performance. Like, well, I really can't comfortably sit for that long, and I need to lie down every couple of hours. Well, you might at that point consider requesting an accommodation, because you are entitled to one under the ADA. And there are other disabilities, even if you never got accommodated for them before, that would entitle you to accommodations on the bar exam because nothing else is like the bar exam, and it has unique demands that will pose a barrier to some students. So that is also something to consider. We posted an article about it actually earlier today. So look into that. If you feel like you just keep bumping into a wall on the bar exam and you're not sure why, read that article and think about whether there might be a hidden disability there. Because some people are smart enough and work hard enough and still bump into that barrier. Yeah, you'll see the article. Anyway, it's tough. And then when we're considering all these life considerations, we have to boil down and say, what kind of study schedule can I realistically keep? I will post the extended study plan, but the way that it's written is 4 months, 16 weeks, so a little less than 4 months. It's 4 months of blocks of study. So it's written in 8 blocks a week. If you have more than 4 months, you could do fewer blocks. And people go, wait a second, my calendar has 7 days a week in it. Why are there 8 blocks? Because you're going to put those blocks where they work for you. Some people will do 2 or 3 blocks on Saturday and then do the weeknights during the week, or 3 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, and 3 or 4 different nights in the week. You know, to add up to going through those 8 blocks. I tried to write all of the assignments, and for the California exam, I had another instructor help me. We worked together to try to get all of those assignments 3 to 4 hours long. So each block is about 3 hours. If you're retaking and you don't need the lectures again, there are assignments that you can cut. If you are retaking BarMax and you've seen those essays before and know them really well, there are assignments that you can cut. But for the most part, we want you doing a lot of practice. The extended study plan has all of the MBE questions scheduled in it, every MBE question in BarMax, and it has a lot of essays. In fact, most of the essays from the past 10 years. So it's a schedule that if you follow the blocks, you will get through all that material. So if you need a really comprehensive review, then I recommend the extended study plan. I will attach it here in its current form. And that's it for me, Jen. That was a lot. Did I go way over the time I wanted to? Yes, I did.
That is okay. So I think what I'm going to do first, before I jump into some of the more like, okay, so now that I
stopped screen sharing.
Oh, okay. I was
like, I'm still here.
What happened? But no, you're still, I'm still here. Everyone's here. Okay. So I think what I'll do first is talk a little bit about the scaling. And I will show on the screen 2 resources that I think will be helpful for those of you who have questions about scaling. I'll also put the links in the chat so you will have them, everyone. Okay, so one is the State Bar of California has a wonderful, probably the best explanation of what scaling is and how it's done that doesn't get super mathy, that I think will be helpful. And the scaling metric might be a little different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but what scaling is doesn't change. So here's this nice little article about what scaling is. And then I'll also put in here the link to a publication that the National Conference of Bar Examiners puts out every year that talks about what are the, sort of scores on the MBE, from administration to administration and jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Y'all don't need to read that if you're not interested in it. That's why we're here. But for those of you who, like me, end up getting in the weeds and you're like, yeah, exactly. I will put in there so you can see it. And then we'll talk super quickly about like, okay, what is scaling? How does it work? So basically, for me, it's helpful to start with like, what is the purpose of scaling? And the purpose of scaling is to try to keep the exam the same from year to year to year, and also between essay questions, right? So if you think about, I don't know, like a subject, I had to smile when Celeste was like, secure transactions, you just need to know a few things and then it'll work. And I was like, yeah, sure, Celeste, that's because you're, the subject matter expert on that. Let me tell you that for the rest of us, we're like, but no, seriously. So let's say that you're me, right? And you get to that secure transactions question, and I am not as good at doing this as Celeste is, but
Sometimes I get lucky.
So let's say that we put our MBE score over, our MBE over here, right? And if we sort of we think about the MBE, right? We know that it's going to be scaled from, It's going to be scored from about, why are you doing this, computer? There we go. From 1 to 200. Now, only 175 of those questions are actually scored, but your scores can still range from, ostensibly, they could go up to 120 when they're calibrated, right? That's not really like what, usually like in that National Conference of Bar Examiners publication I just sent y'all, the top score is usually like 180 or 179, something like that, right? But we would sort of assume that, right? So we would think, if the top score is usually, like here-ish at, 179, say, and we would sort of expect that, if you just marked, B all the way down, you should get about 50 questions right, so 50-ish, right? And then the median score is usually around, and it varies, are we talking February or July, whatever. Usually it's going to be about, let's say, a 139 or so, right? So now you know what the highest score is likely to be, what the median score is likely to be, what the lowest score is likely to be. And depending on your jurisdiction, they're going to have what's called a cut score. Okay. Many jurisdictions, that cut score is going to be a 135. That is the usual cut score. That does not mean that you need to get a 135 to pass. I'm going to say that again. Doesn't mean you need to get a 135 to pass. What it means is that they're going to look at the number of people who are between, well, I kind of wish that went the other way, but that's fine, between sort of here and here. And that's the number of people who are going to pass every single essay. So we're going to go over here and we're going to have, Celeste secure transactions question here, right? And we're going to say, okay, here's, the way that the secure transactions scores kind of went over time, right? Like if we just took the best secure transactions answer and we put it up here and, then here's the rest of us, right? There's Celeste, and then here's the rest of us, and I'm here, right? But then let's say we had something that, is easier, like maybe it's crim. I like crim. So in my example, crim is going to be the easier one. And, so maybe here, everybody is bunched up at the top, right? So we're all like up here. Whoops. I can draw a straight line, guys, I promise, right? And what we're going to do is they're going to kind of go through and they're going to say, okay, so here's our number of people, right? And so we're going to put a line here. We're going to put a line here. There are fancy mathematic ways to make this happen. There is actually a team of psychometricians who are experts in educational psychology, testing, and statistics who help score the exam and make sure the scale is what it purports to be. But that is essentially what goes on behind the scenes when they are scaling your exam. Also, generally, let's see, I'll close that. If you kind of look at your score, so let's say that you're getting like, a 122 raw. If you add, let's say 12 to 15 points to that, that's about what your scaled MBE score will be. So national average is usually about 63% correct raw, which is going to translate to that median of, being around a 137, 139, 140, And that's, how it's scaled. If you were like, oh my gosh, this is, very, this is way beyond my, interest level or whatever, it is a-okay to be like, yeah, I don't need to know all that, because you don't. What you need to know is ideally I would want you to be somewhere between 63 and 66% correct raw on your MBE by the time you sit for the exam. And I would want you to take away from that this is not a curve, right? So if you think about your curve back in law school, right? Your prof would be like, hey, I can only give 6 A's. And then I have to give, no more than 12 A minuses and B pluses, but I can give, 24 B's. And then I have, and we could only give a certain amount of each number. That is not how the scale works. If every single one of you kicked butt on the MBE, every single one of you would pass every single essay, everybody would pass. If everybody failed the MBE, right? You can't really fail it, but, got below that cut score, no one could be successful. So when we talk about really difficult bar exams, people will, think like, oh, why is this difficult? A lot of times it's difficult simply because, where the state has selected to put its cut score. So I think that answered everybody's scaling questions. Hopefully I've answered all of that for you, but I want to jump into how do we know, what we should do? How do we respond to that? Okay, I've looked at my exam. Jen says I don't, have to get some magic number on the MBE. What do I do with that information? When I am thinking about, why are people struggling with the bar exam? In my mind, there's really kind of three reasons. One, you ran out of time, life stuff came up, something happened, right? Like just, oh my God, you didn't have time to study. Or maybe you studied your butt off, which is part of why this is frustrating, right? But you weren't getting the reward that you wanted. So maybe we can help you study something differently or study differently by itself, right? Or maybe you're someone who has some anxiety or maybe some other learning differences. And so how do we address that? All right. Whoops. Well, there we go. All right. So when I talk about that running out of time or not having enough time, what do I mean? Sometimes it really is that life stuff. Celeste mentioned her student who, had a family member who was diagnosed with cancer. I had a student who was number one in her law school class who had a baby who was born prematurely. And she called me up and she was like, what do you think I should do? And I was like, yeah, I kind of think you should maybe not take the exam. And she's like, I'm going to do it. And let me tell you, this woman was brilliant. And if there was anybody who could pass while all that was going on, it would have been her. But she didn't, right? Took it again the next administration. She was totally fine. So, sometimes it really is that there's life stuff going on. Sometimes it's that you just don't have, the hours to put in, right? You just didn't take it. Maybe you were the person who was like, MPT, whatever, I could totally do that. And no, you need to put the time in. So how do you manage that? If you are like me, right? It's tons of urgent work that is due in 2 days. And she's like kind of sweating, right? And so she looks over TV shows, right? So if you are that person who sometimes you accidentally look at something, you do something else, what do you do? So the first thing that I'm going to tell you, and I see this a lot with repeaters, is that you treat it like it's an opportunity to beat yourselves up. This is not meant to be punishment. So if you are avoiding studying, right, I want to know why. Do you have a comfy place to work? Do you have a comfortable chair? If you, have difficulty sitting for the 7 hours, do you have your nice comfy back pillow? Do you study better laying in bed or sitting on your couch or sitting in a chair at your desk? Are you someone who studies better without background noise or with background noise? I will share with you that I was diagnosed with ADHD later in life, ADD later in life. And, I grew up, my mom was like, oh, absolutely not. You cannot have any kind of background noise. No, 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 no. Because that's the traditional advice, right? But for a lot of folks who are maybe neurodivergent, right? Like we'd study better if there's some background noise. I get a lot of joy out of having my different colored pens. So when we talk about MPT methods, my MPT method, there's a video about that too, is all about using different color pens, having new office supplies. Maybe I want new Post-its, right? Or little flags. It just makes it more enjoyable. Maybe you work better when you have a friend or a colleague that you can study with. Maybe you just work better when other people are around, right? Sometimes if I go to a coffee shop, even if they don't know like what it is I'm supposed to be doing for work, just the fact that there's other people there helps me stay on track. Sometimes I will sign in with other folks also on Zoom, and we will have what I call a work party where we're both on Zoom and we're both working. But you can check in and just say like, hey, are you still focused? What are you doing? Think about rewards, and those rewards can be big rewards, right? Like, hey, I'm going to remind myself that when I'm done with the bar exam, I'm going on vacation. They can be small rewards. When I get done with, this section in the lecture, I'm going to go, have a cup of coffee or go for a quick walk or check my Facebook. Or I guess, many folks don't. My kids tell me Facebook is not, cool anymore, but whatever it is that you do, right? Make sure that you're giving yourself breaks. This shouldn't feel like 7 uninterrupted hours of exhausting, draining bar study. This should, you want to break it up. Most of us can really pay attention to something for about like 45, 50 minutes to about 70-ish minutes, right? Which is why most of your classes are scheduled in those kind of blocks. Take a break if you need to. There is no shame in having some fidget spinners, right? And there are all kinds of them, right? This is, we just have a big bucket of fidget spinners at my house, and sometimes I'm the one using it, and sometimes my kids are using it. There are even very classy ones like this ring, which is designed to spin, so you can just sit there and do this while you're studying. When I was in law school, again, I hadn't yet been diagnosed, and I tended to do the thing with my pen, right? So I'd do like this. And I had friends who were like, Jen, I cannot study with you with that ridiculousness. But it just, it was kind of my way of getting through this.
Did I take the bar next to you?
You might have. I was probably that irritating person. Everybody was probably like, what are you doing?
Well, it's you and the leg shaker.
I also do that sometimes. So, hey, again, there is no shame in this though, guys, right? Like if the best way for you to study is to have on, Law and Order and have your fidget spinner and study, do it, right? This should not be something that you dread. Try to make it as least dreadful as possible. Sometimes you've got somebody who's really struggling with some kind of tragedy or difficulty that's happened in their life, right? You're the person you have a family member who's deathly ill, and, you're struggling with making that decision about, do I take it again or not? What I would ask is, are you the kind of person where, you're going to sit there and be thinking about this, and it's going to make it so much harder for you to study. And next thing you know, you're Googling, whatever it is that your person has, and it's just taking time away from the bar, in which case, maybe it would be better to wait. Or sometimes folks they almost have the opposite, where it's like, okay, I can control my study time. I can spend time thinking about bar stuff and not this, thing that's going on in my family. And it, for those folks, sometimes it's like, yeah, go ahead and take the exam, do what you need to do. Right. So let's talk about life stuff and how do you plan around it? One of my friends who is an attorney posted this the other day, and it's been really resonating with me, right? The little mouse who's having a tough time with his plan. So what does that plan look like? So the first thing that I'm going to ask you is, what can you take off your plate? And these are just some ideas, right? Can you set up all your bills on automatic bill pay? Can you hire someone to help you clean? Or, sometimes we get loved ones who are like, what can I do to support you? and your mom's like, I'm going to call you every day and ask you if you've been studying. And you're like, no, mom, that will only make this worse. Maybe what you say to her is, hey, would you mind dropping off dinner once a week? Or would you mind, buying me maid service or helping me clean my house so it takes half as long or whatever? I did not know this. There are actually places where you can drop off your laundry and someone will wash your clothes for you. Amazing. That may be something to invest in for a little while. What do you think, Celeste?
I had to do that when I worked at Big Law because, the other associates had these wives. Yep. And I had the wash, dry, and fold.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
My laundry came back in a square and my roommate was horrified that I had somebody else like cleaning my underwear. And I am like, yes, my underwear is clean and square. You do what you got to do.
Right. Exactly.
Got to do.
And, look, like I went into legal aid. There was no way I would have been paying for somebody to do my laundry permanently. Right. But let me tell you, if I had known about it during bar prep, 12 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever. Yeah, maybe so. Think about, your babysitting co-op. So maybe that means like actually hiring childcare. Maybe it means putting your kids in summer camp. Maybe it means you tell your friends like, hey, if you can watch the kids now, I'll watch them in August, right? But what can you kind of take off your plate? Think about, in terms of getting stuff off your plate too, is there anything coming up that you can do now so that when you start to do your bar prep in deeper earnest, you're not trying to balance, oh, this week I'm supposed to go get a checkup and next week I'm supposed to go get a haircut. And the week after that, it's my dental cleaning. And then I need to go get my oil changed. Do that stuff now so it's off your plate. I would also think about, do you have moments of found time? And I know one of our questions was someone saying, look, I'm a single mom and I'm working full time. And is it even worth it for me to take the bar exam this time around? And some of it is this like kind of planning stuff. Like, and one of the first questions I'll ask folks if they meet with me is, realistically, how much time can you put in? And people will say, 9 to 12 hours a day. And it's like, okay, no, realistically, right? Like realistically, what can you do? And also, folks, you don't need that much time, for study.
Right. We want time that your brain is engaged. And there's things we love in the world, but our brain is not really engaged, actively studying for 9 to 12 hours. You can do things that are passive and time wasting for 9 to 12 hours, but that is not the most effective method of bar study. And we want you actually like taking care of your health and other things during the non-study hours. So yeah, we do not recommend 12 hours a day of study, even though that's what I did when I took a competitor's program that completely overwhelmed me when I was first out of law school.
Yep. So, think about like, okay, could you do MBEs while you're on your phone? Whether you're doing them like actually like on the phone or, maybe you have a booklet and you're doing those. Ours are available on, your devices. So you can just like do them whenever. Maybe you do flashcards. We have flashcards for you, but I would still say gold standard is to personalize the flashcards to what you don't know. And I would make them myself in addition to those or whatever. And I actually punched a hole in mine, put a shower curtain ring through it, although apparently now they're sold this way, like somebody else capitalized on my idea, but that's fine. And I would carry them with me and like, hey, I have a minute, I'll go through some flashcards. Think about, are there ways that you can combine your, things that you do, right? So when I was studying for the bar exam, I was a single mom. We did a lot of like McDonald's play places or the park or whatever while I was trying to study. Now they've got these indoor playgrounds, which look amazing, where, you can go in and sometimes they sell food or you can bring in food and the kids just play. Put your stuff out on a study. Maybe instead of family game night, you've got, quiz mom with the flashcards, family fun time, but are there things that you can combine so that you have sort of almost found time? Or the other day I was talking to somebody about commuting and it's like, hey, maybe that's when you're listening to your lectures or you can, one of the questions was about like different strategies for different types of learning, right? For those of you who are auditory, you can actually create auditory flashcards where you say, what is a battery? And then you pause, leave a pause in your recording. A battery is the harmful or offensive, contact with the person of another. And then when you're playing that back in the car, you're trying to give the answer before you hear yourself say the answer. So if you're an auditory person, that can really work. But also if you're just somebody where you're like, man, I got a long commute, I got to find a way to make use of that time. Think about listening to lectures or making auditory flashcards, things like that. I would suggest, and I don't know if this is going to work. Oh, maybe it will. This is one thing to think about is to actually, will it work? Yeah. Okay. Look at that. Okay. So you've got, maybe you start here, right? And then you're like, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And you can kind of look at what is the prep actually like. And then I want you to think about, oh, wait, you guys cannot see that. I was so excited. I was like, look at me. I'm making this thing work, but it doesn't work. But there you go. So you can put this up here and then you can say to yourself, like, what is coming up for me during this time period, right? Like, oh, Mother's Day, or Father's Day, or, the 4th of July weekend, or, some big work deadline. Put it on your chart. Don't, think that you have to have one way to study for it, right? And then maybe, you're one of those people where you're like, man, the MPT kicked my butt. I want to do at least 7 MPTs between now and the bar exam. Great. Maybe you put one every other week, right? And you're not like don't feel like you need to do this blind. You don't, because you're also going to look at your bar prep calendar. And you're going to say like, okay, when am I supposed to be learning about which piece? And that's going to allow you to see the whole schedule. I'm going to also, whoops. Oh, apparently oh, there we go. It's out of order. That's okay. But so maybe, oh, nope, this did not work. So I'm going to go here and do this. This was an example of a retaker's schedule where he worked in the evenings, right? And he was also super into the gym. Like that was one of the most important things that he had in his life was going to the gym. And so it's like, okay, how do we make time for practice and also study? And so maybe that's something that you do. And, maybe you're like, yeah, that's kind of low tech, Jen. I use my iPhone or I use my Google Calendar, or maybe, you've got yourself a paper calendar. Like the brand that I like is the Happy Planner. And I love this one. It says, all you need is love and a cat, because I like to foster rescue kittens. That's my thing that makes me happy, whatever it is. Right. But I want you to make that schedule and I want you to be deliberate about it. Whoops. I also, speaking about being realistic, right? I want you to think about your goals, right? So don't say to yourself like, okay, I'm going to study torts for 3 days, which when I was preparing for the bar, that was one of the things that my bar prep company that I was using it was like torts, 3 days. Okay, I'm going to open up this book to the torts section. I'm going to get up to go get a cup of coffee. I'm going to realize I need to do some dishes. I'm going to do the dishes. Then I'm going to realize that like, oh, we're out of cream and I'm going to go grocery shopping. And then I'm going to come home and I'll be like, yeah, I studied torts because look, I opened it up to the torts page. Much more effective to say something that is specific and realistic, right? I'm going to study, 3 sections of the torts outline. And I'm going to try to do 20 MBE questions or whatever it is that's realistic for you. I also want you to think about using your time well. So think about, what are you good at? If you're that person that on that score sheet that Celeste showed you, where it's like, man, I know how to write an essay and I did well on the MBE, maybe you don't ignore those, right? Because you don't want to like lose those skills, but maybe you're going to spend more time on the MPT. Or maybe you are the person where you're like, I can write, I just struggle with the MBEs. Again, maybe you're going to put more time into those MBEs. Also, for those of you who are like, I don't have a ton of time, I want you to think about the fact that The 7 topics that are on the MBE are on the MBE, and they also will make up some of your essays. So there's value in preparing for that, right? Making sure you know those things. So think about, what did you struggle with, both in terms of like, I have no idea what's going on in con law, man. Like, it just takes me twice as long. Personalize that schedule to what works for you. And let me tell you, this is something that y'all as retakers, this is an advantage that our first-time takers don't have. You know what you're good at, you know what you struggle with, and hopefully you have some idea of what you did last time and whether or not it was effective. Adjust your schedule accordingly. All right. So again, are things working out as they planned? Sort of. So, you are, like me, you're a mom when bar prep rolls around, and you had planned to spend 3 hours, writing 2 essays and reviewing them. And now the kid got sick and you can't. Because you have a written schedule, you want to find a place for those 2 hours and put them somewhere, right? Maybe that means you're giving up 2 hours of free time or whatever, but you're putting that, you're able to see what are the tasks that didn't get done, and you're able to find time of where they can go. I also want you to be deliberate. So in addition to my, plan, right, I might have something that is like, a to-do list, right? Which, like, again, lots of different colors, because that's kind of how I roll. This is like super blurry, but there you go. Sometimes I'll just start at the top and go down. Not the brightest thing to do, right? Especially if you know you have limited time. If you know you have limited time, I want you to do, generally what is most important, but also if you have something that's urgent, but maybe less important, but it needs to get done, maybe that gets done. Make sure you make time for that, and then fit in the less important stuff as you go. Sometimes it works well to like start with something easy. If you're just having one of those, the bar sucks and I can't believe I have to do this again, and it's the worst kind of days, sometimes it's better to start with something short and easy, get it out of the way, you get that little morale boost, and you go from there. That can be, a really good strategy, even if that little thing that you did wasn't the most important. I also want you to think of high energy tasks and low energy tasks, right? So when I decided to take the California bar, I was, teaching at a law school. I was a single mom. I had, kids, full-time job, whatever. And I knew that one of the most important things was going to be practicing essays. And so I was like, what I'm going to do? I'm going to get up every day at 5 a.m. and write an essay. Let me tell you all, I did that twice. I am not a morning person. I am just not. That was far better time for me to get a cup of coffee, read, the outline, that kind of thing. I'm going to save the essay writing until the evening. So same thing for you as you're thinking about when you're going to do stuff. And obviously, if you're working or you have family obligations, you have to work around those too. But think about, kind of have a list of like, these are the different things that would be good for me to do. And where can I fit them in my day based on the time I have available and the energy I have available. Okay, so that's kind of the time and life stuff. When I say studying the wrong way or not studying the right things, what do I mean? So this meme has been about for a little bit. By the way, the original person who drew this image is Allie Broche. She's amazing. She writes Hyperbole and a Half. It's a lovely webcomic. She hasn't posted in a long time, but it's still worth, you could use one of your little breaks that you're going to schedule so that bar prep doesn't feel like a punishment, and you could go check out her website. So, what kind of mistakes do I see people doing? They are focusing just on memorization. Now, a lot of professors, even in law school, will say like, it's not a test of memorization. And what they mean by that is not don't memorize, which is what it sounds like. What they mean by that is memorization alone is not going to be sufficient. So if you think about the ladder, right, the ladder of learning, memorization is the bottom rung. You can't skip it. You got to do it. But that can't be all you do. You've also got to do practice and application. Sometimes I'll have folks who are like, well, I don't understand this, so I'm going to wait to practice till I understand it. Practicing will help you understand it. Sometimes folks will say, I'm going to wait to practice until I have done that memorization you said I had to do. Yes, but here's the thing. Actually, practicing will help you memorize, right? Sometimes I have folks who are going to practice the questions, but they don't look at the model answers, right? And I'm going to talk in a second about how you use model answers, but you can't just practice and hope you did well, right? Or they do some really passive learning where they're reading and rereading, or they're listening to lectures, or they're doing questions, but they're not getting any feedback. That doesn't allow you to adjust what you're doing. So, and for many of us, it's what we have traditionally done is to read and reread. And sometimes folks will be like, well, sometimes I highlight. That doesn't make it active, friends. So what do I mean by active learning? Like, what are some ways that you can do that? So one thing is going to be the open book study method. And Celeste did a whole video about that, you guys. But, the idea is, you have your book, or you have your screen open, you've got your essay open. If you come across something and you're like, oh, shoot, what is the rule for false imprisonment? I can never remember that. You're going to go look it up. Here's the thing, though, y'all. I don't want you to just go look it up. See, there you go. I want you to have a list of things you don't know. And you're going to stick false imprisonment on your list of things you don't know. Because again, as a repeater, I am 100% sure that there are things you know. So I don't need you studying that. I need you studying the stuff you don't know. You can also make flashcards or do flashcards. For those of you who, and sometimes what I'll ask folks, one thing that you can do, right, is to make a sheet where you write your term on one side and you write your definition on the other.
I'm glad you're showing this. I have taught so many people this one since you first showed it. Way back in our memorization strategies office hour. Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you're like, hey, I'm struggling with memorization, we have something.
I've learned even more strategies since then because people's brains work differently. But this one's so cool. I'll show you.
Right. Okay. So you've got, you've got your term here. Maybe it's false imprisonment, and you're like, oh, false imprisonment is, the intentional confinement of another within a bounded area, and they are aware of or harmed by the confinement, right? And then you've got IIED, which is the intentional or reckless causing of severe emotional distress through conduct which shocks the conscience, right? Then you're going to fold it. So you've got just the terms showing. You're going to put it on a new piece of paper, and but that Jen is apparently not good at folding things appropriately today, but that's fine. So now you've got just the terms, and you've got a piece of blank paper. You can now write your terms, right? Write your definitions. Like, oh, false imprisonment. What is that? You can also start slow. Maybe you start with just here's the definitions. So what, when it says confinement of another within a bounded area, oh yeah, that's false imprisonment. And, this thing about making people have emotional distress, that's IIED. And now you've got just the blank terms. And so you get to write your definitions. You've now written those definitions 3 times. For a lot of us, that's going to be enough. Think about doing essays and getting feedback. Think about doing the MBEs. Sometimes folks will say well, I'm going to do, 25 MBEs. Friend, by the time I get to that 25th MBE, the likelihood that I remember, what I was thinking about with question 1 or what question 1 was even about, minimal. Think about how we learn things. Or for those of you who might not have little, you think about a little kid, right? It's going to try to stand up. It kind of and then it falls on its bum. And then it has to try again. And then it's okay, I can take a step. And that's how we learn. We try something, it works or it doesn't. We get immediate feedback. We try it again, or we try something different. For those of you who don't have kids, think about, training your dog, right? When it does something good, you give it a treat. When it does something it shouldn't, you say no. And it learns by trying something and getting immediate feedback. Same thing with the MBE. Do the question, check the answer. if you missed it because you didn't.
And do look up the rule before you even pick that answer choice. That is the key of the open book study method. And I'm waving my book around. This is the BarMax outlines. Wait, is this? Yeah, this is UBE. And you can see it's only about an inch thick. This is all the law you need to know to pass the bar. Do not let somebody make you think that you need like a big stack of 7 books. The rules, the black letter law is in here in a fairly reasonable size of print with enough white space on the page. These are the exact same outlines as appear on the screen during our lectures. So if you are working on a problem, you can have this open in your hand, especially if you're the type of person that likes to scribble on it and stick Post-its on it. But if, or you can have it open on a different screen. Maybe you have the questions on when device and you have the outline on your computer, or you have a split screen on your computer where one web browser, because you can open BarMax in 2 web browsers at once with your account. So you have the question on one side and the outline on the other. Do not pick an answer choice when you're saying, oh, I know this is about false imprisonment, but I can't remember the bit about, it's like harm or something like that. Go look it up. And now you go, oh, it's an or. Awareness or harm. So wait a second, this person was unconscious. Now the fact in your little problem and the rule, this person was unconscious and they weren't hurt by it. So that means they were neither harmed nor aware. Holy cow, this looked like a false imprisonment to me, but it's not. You've just gone through this whole really effective mental process. And that mental process is what is going to help this to stick, because you've got facts and the rule and you're learning them at the same time. You're not trying to learn all the rules and then apply them to a diverse set of facts. I think about that baby learning to walk. Yes, the step, the falling down, the trying to stand up again. That's great. It's not like step, fall down. Now let's learn how to use a fork. Like, no, completely different skill, new problem. Let me focus on this problem for a while, you know? So this is the method that works, and we want you using it. And then all of the memorization methods. Anyway, Jen, I'll let you get back. I get passionate about this though, because when people switch to it, it's another game changer for them.
Yeah. And, think about your, in addition to, like, hey, if you're there and you're like, shoot, I can't remember this rule, and looking it up, if you miss it because you didn't know what the rule was, I want you to go, write that rule down. Either one, you had to look it up or you missed it. Put it on your list of things you don't know. Okay. Think about the idea that it's, if we think about studying, right? It's not just the like, be active and blah, blah, blah. It's also about knowing what you need to know and knowing how to convey what you know, right? So as you're reviewing, I want you to think about common themes, right? So I can tell you right now that IIED on MBE questions shows up with either an annoying pet that bothers the neighbor, and so they harm the pet on purpose, where they know the owner of the pet will be distressed by it, or people calling a parent and saying something heinous has happened to their child, right? Sometimes the pet is a cat that's getting into the neighbor's yard. Sometimes it's a dog that barks the whole time, but you're going to know. Irritating pet plus angry neighbor plus intentionally causing harm to the animal to distress the owner, IIED, right? I also want you to think about, looking for language patterns. So the National Conference of Bar Examiners, I had the opportunity to go to a conference with them, and I got to sit next to some of the people that draft the questions, right? You guys, there's only so many people, right? And there's only so many ways to test this stuff. So in addition to like, hey, there's only, these common themes and what happens appears, also common language is going to appear. So for me, if I see a problem that says, there was a sudden gust of wind, I'm thinking, well, how sudden could it be? Isn't wind pretty foreseeable? But to the national conference, if they tell you that it's sudden, it's unforeseeable. Okay, it's their world. You're just living in it. Now you know that to them, sudden means unforeseeable. Write it down. if you do nothing else, so you leave and you're like, can't even remember what Jen talked about. Do practice questions, y'all.
Practice questions. I love what you said about sudden. I know that question. And or the experienced rancher, remember him?
Yes.
The experienced rancher knows what the weather patterns are like and that, a hailstorm's going to flatten the wheat. Okay. Right. And I have had, because I didn't show this when I was showing off BarMax, but we have message boards that go with every question. So if you have a question about that particular MBE question, you can read what other questions people have had and see if an instructor has answered it, or post a new question. We have 2 instructors in there all the time answering questions. And I'll get this. Well, this is a stupid question. It shouldn't be in BarMax. And I'll say, this is a real past MBE question. And I kind of agree it's annoying, but this is a great opportunity for you, because now we have this weirdo question. It helps us get inside the examiner's heads. Without that weirdo question, you might know the rule, but you don't know how they're going to test the rule. The weirdo questions get you inside their heads. So don't resent them, because you're doing them in practice, right?
Right.
Only the ones on the exam contribute to your score.
Yeah, exactly. So, and same thing with the essay questions, right? So you're going to have real released essay questions in your BarMax materials. Take a look at them. Like, what comes up over and over again? I can write your crim question right now, you guys. Some folks are going to agree to do something. It's going to be a felony. Someone will die during the course of it. I can write your Civ Pro question right now. Somebody's going to be making something in one state or doing something in one state. It's going to end up in another state where it's going to injure someone. And the question is going to be, where can they sue? Right? Once you've seen it enough, you can almost pre-plan what you'll write. So sometimes we talk about model answers, and some states will call them model answers. Some states will call them representative good answers, which means like this is not the only way that you can.
That's Minnesota.
Right, exactly. Minnesota.
Right. So I love it, because there's what state is it? Is it Arkansas? They say this is the best answer. I just feel like it's cultural. Like, this is the best, y'all. And then up in Minnesota, they're like, well, we don't want anybody to get a big head up here, so we're just going to say it's a representative good answer. And then you call New York and you go, hey, are these models? They go, what? It's a sample. What am I going to give you, garbage? It's called a sample, right? I love that. Anyway, they call them different things, but they're not perfect.
Right. And so, I personally love to go I'll look at something from Minnesota and New York, and then something from Arkansas, something from Texas, something from Ohio, to get a sense of like, how did the various applicants answer this question? It's not just about seeing, like, did you discuss all the issues? Because that's what a lot of people will do. They'll be like, yeah, I saw that issue. Yeah, I saw that issue. Yeah, I saw that issue. But like, how did they organize it? How does that organization match up with the the materials that are released from the National Conference of Bar Examiners that are in your BarMax materials? How are those rule statements? And as we tell you to memorize, sometimes folks are like, where am I getting this stuff that I'm memorizing? Lectures, outlines. But if you see something in one of those model answers, as long as it's correct, double check, that really resonates with you, you're like, that's the way that I get this rule. Maybe it's coming from there. Think about, how did they use the facts? Were there some facts they didn't use? Did they have both arguments and counter arguments? Did they say, therefore, jurisdiction in state A is appropriate? Or did they say, it is likely that jurisdiction in state A will be appropriate if they can establish that, they have sufficient minimum contacts? Because things like that, when we talk about learning about how to write the answer, that's what we mean. Okay, so memorization, right? And there's been lots written about the different ways that the bar exam is flawed, but certainly one of them is this idea that your boss or client is going to walk into your office and tell you, you have to tell me the answer to this question and you can't look anything up, right? That's not a real thing, but it's what the bar exam asks. So how do you memorize, and how do you improve that retention of the things you're trying to memorize? So the first thing, and for the person who asked about what about neurodivergency? So this is something in particular to think about, right? And sometimes what I will ask folks is, when was the last time that you had to memorize something and what did you do? And sometimes they'll kind of give me this blank look and I'll say, no, really, like for, your high school English class where you had to recite a sonnet, or your Sunday school class where you had to, memorize your Bible verse, or your community theater where you had to memorize your lines. How did you do that? And so there's all different ways to do this. Maybe this is making yourself a flowchart with, lots of different colors. Maybe that is making flashcards. Maybe it is, boiling something down to one sheet. We have attack outlines as well, but maybe you're going to, work with those and, make them your own. Maybe you're going to have Post-it notes, or I'd like to take those big easel size Post-its, write stuff on them, stick them up around the house. And my kids have picked up on this, right? So for a while, my daughter is in what used to be called Boy Scouts, but now it's Scouts, right? And she had to memorize the Scout law. That was on our dining room table. She had taped it down. Like every time she was eating, she would look and see that. The list of things that my dog is allergic to is above my coffee maker, because when I'm sitting there in the morning waiting for the coffee to come on, there it is. I can look at it and hope that I memorize it. So think about, if you're like me and like seeing something over and over again is helpful, put it on a note, Post-it note, or a piece of paper, stick it up in your bathroom mirror, put it, above your coffee maker, put it on your table, put it, in your bedroom next to the bed so that when you wake up in the morning, you're going to see it. Think about, how can you do that? Think about integrating colors or pictures. Think about taking notes as you listen to the lecture, right? And if you're me, one part of your brain is going to say, why would I do that when the outline's right there? But if you're also me, you're going to know that if you're not taking notes, you're going to listen to the first, 2 minutes of the lecture. And then you're going to be imagining, well, what would happen if, I was able to take that vacation? And look at what? But if I'm taking notes, I'm going to remember. I will also tell folks sometimes, if you're not sure how you memorize, what would you do if you wrote yourself a grocery list and you went to the grocery store without it? And what I can tell you is that I tend to handwrite my grocery list, and I can almost close my eyes and imagine that grocery list. I benefit from writing it out, and there's data on that. There is data that says that for many of us, handwriting increases our retention. And then for me, using different colors or using something colorful helps me remember it later on. Sometimes I will have folks tell me, well, I would sort of remember what it was I wanted to cook, and then I could reverse engineer into what I needed to buy for that product. I would tell that person, make sure you're including examples. Sometimes I'll hear people say like, Jen, I was doing whatever it was and I could hear your voice. And I'm like, okay, you're going to do better if you can hear whatever it is. So you're the person who should be listening to those lectures. You're the person who should be using those auditory flashcards. And you want to think about, when you're thinking about memorizing, I want you to think about memorizing on a micro level, right? So intent means it's your purpose or desire, or it is knowledge to a substantial certainty that the outcome will occur. But it's also knowing that if you back up, there are 7 intentional torts. And if you back up even further, those all fall in torts, right? And kind of seeing the little bits and then how they fit together. Celeste mentioned the importance of taking care of your physical health. I'm going to tell you one of the first things we get rid of when we are stressed or we're feeling pressed for time is sleep. But sleep is when your body forms new memories, right? So if you've ever had the bar exam stress dream, which many of us have had, that is going to, that's an example of your brain sorting through all of the things that you did related to the bar that day and kind of deciding what to keep and what not to keep. There was also research that came out about 2 years ago showing that the protein that makes us forgetful is cleaned out of our brains when we're asleep. Sleep is super important. Same thing for exercise. There's data that shows we tend to remember better when we're getting regular exercise. One of my favorite studies was they took two groups of fifth graders. They put one of them on treadmills and gave them a lecture. The other group sat at a desk and had a lecture. And those folks on the treadmill remembered more.
That's fantastic. So yeah, and you didn't do the food thing, which I know is usually part of your mom's speech too, but we want to get to Q&A.
Yes.
So I will say that sometimes I swear there was a whole period of my life when I was early in practice, when I forgot that my brain was attached to my body. I really lived in my head and I thought I could do that. Well, I wasn't going to be successful at that unless I took care of my body too. I had to learn, like for me, sleep was the biggie, right? I had to learn how to go to bed at night and respect my body's need for sleep and not just try to live in my brain. Because then, I start getting this pain everywhere and I start getting foggy minded. Like seriously, I was in my early 30s, I'm in my 50s now, right? So I had to figure that one out. If I was going to keep functioning, I had to take care of myself, but you need to take care of yourself too. I want you to hit this first Q&A and it does relate to this slide.
Okay, let's see.
It's actually the one at the bottom. Some of these I'm going to take and some I'm going to give to you. How do you explain doing well at a Q&A, like a practice test under simulated test conditions at home, but then bombing on test day? When and how could this be overcome? This is such a Jennifer question. And I think SpongeBob is going to help us.
Indeed, SpongeBob will help you. And generally, when I am seeing that, the next thing I'm going to ask this person is, were you anxious on exam day? And what's interesting is, let me go actually here. Sometimes folks will say, well, I don't know. I don't think I was anxious. And it's like, okay, well, sometimes it's like, hey, I need to tell this person, like, this is what anxiety feels like. Your heart's pounding, you're sweating. Maybe your palms are really sweaty. Maybe you're shaking. Maybe your mouth feels really dry. Notice I've been drinking some water, right? Because when I get anxious, my mouth gets dry. Maybe you notice that you're typing like this because your shoulders are up around your ears. A lot of times that's what it's going to be. And that anxiety, sometimes it's even just, you don't sort of spend your time the way that you meant to, right? You just have that moment of like, wait, what happened? I had an applicant the other day who has a previous history working as a master plumber. And she was telling me about her exam for her master plumber's exam. And she was like, I knew what I was going to do. I practiced it over and over again. And then I got there. And for some reason, I didn't do that. And it's like, hello, anxiety. Hello. So what are you going to do? So the first thing I want you to think about is there's sort of this chronic anxiety or this generalized anxiety, which is what's happening sort of day to day over the next, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whenever it is you begin studying, or year, if you decide to take some extra time, you've got some anxiety. So what are you going to be doing to manage that anxiety? Exercise and sleep. We just talked about that, right? But also they have shown that I think it's like 20 minutes of cardio exercise every day can be as effective for anxiety as an antidepressant. Sleep, super important for learning, but also super important for emotional regulation. Think about building your social connections. Even for those of us who are introverts, being isolated, not great. And bar exam study can be super lonely and super isolating. There's been some data that mindfulness can be helpful. We have a session on mindfulness. There's also a Center for Mindfulness in the Law at one of the law schools. If you Google, you can find it. Think about, having support, which can be just a tutor. Like I will tell you, sometimes I'm meeting with folks and my job is to listen to them as they tell me, like, these things happened and it made me anxious. And then this is what I did. And I say, that sounds amazing. Sometimes, maybe that looks like having a bar buddy that you're studying with, whatever it is that you need that helps you feel supported. Thinking about your breathing, thinking about journaling can sometimes be effective. So sometimes what's going on with anxious thoughts is that your brain is shifted into that fight or flight or freeze mode. And so your brain is like, hey, did you remember to go grocery shopping? Don't we need to make cupcakes for the event tomorrow? And what about the rule against perpetuities? Do you even know that? And what are your friends going to think if you don't pass the bar exam this time? And you're just like, all of these thoughts are going on. Sometimes writing it down kind of tricks your brain so that it stops reminding you of that stuff. And it seems like the sweet spot is about more than 10 minutes, less than 20. If you go more than that, you kind of get stuck in the anxious space. If you do less than that, you don't get the benefit. Also think about your eating. So I had a friend who used to say, if you're doing drugs before the bar exam, just keep doing them until afterwards. But the idea being that like giving up this unhealthy habit might be difficult to manage at the same time that you're studying for the bar. I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to say if you're doing drugs, try to stop. But I am going to say, eating a lot of sugar can give you that rush and then the drop, which can contribute to anxiety. Are you managing your caffeine intake? Think about kind of how you're eating and how it affects you. And then we talked about this part. Okay, so Jen, yes, I have some chronic anxiety. I've been managing it. What about test anxiety? So test anxiety is very particular, and it happens to folks, right? You don't have anxiety in sort of your day-to-day life, but you get into that exam and you're anxious. Here's the thing too. I want you to be a little bit anxious, right? A little bit anxious is what gets you up in the morning and to sit down and study. A little bit anxious is what gives you that punch of adrenaline so you can write quickly and you feel like you're firing on all cylinders. So what are you going to do? Think about this as like that old sign that, or what you'll see on TV shows of like the psychiatrist that's going to help the patient that has a phobia of spiders, right? And it's like, first, you're going to talk about the spiders, and then we're going to look at pictures of the spiders. And then you're going to look at the spider behind, in its little terrarium. And then you're going to hold the spider on your hand, right? And you're sort of slowly working up to that. So in the beginning, I want you to do that unlimited open book study. And by the way, you should be doing that even if you're not somebody with anxiety, right? But particularly if you're anxious, because it makes it more tolerable and it gets you to do it. Then maybe it's timed, but it's still open book. So if you really need to look up that material, you can. It's there as your nice little safety blanket, but you're going to try to do it in the time. Then you're going to do it timed closed book, but you're at home in your comfy house with your slippers and your dog. And then I want you to think about doing it in exam conditions. Can you go to the library? Can you go back to your law school? Can you, kind of have that moment of like, this is what it would be like to take this, not only just timed closed book, but to do several questions in a row where you can't check the answer. Does that make your anxiety better or worse? Can you build a tolerance to it? Oh, did you have something to say about that, Celeste? I didn't mean to.
Yeah, I actually want to handle, I want to handle some of the other Q&A on here. I know you want to talk about exam day, and that's important. And I think for that student, it could be an anxiety thing, could be an exam day thing, which you'll get to. But a lot of times people self-sabotage by not sleeping the week of the test or not hydrating, like things like that. And then you're not performing at your best. Or if you did all your practice tests one time of the day, like you always study in the evening and the afternoon, because that's when you're most alert, but the exam starts at 8 a.m. In the weeks up to the exam, you need to start doing practice sets or practice exams that are at 8 a.m. so that you can get your body and your brain in that workspace then. It's tough. It's tough to adjust, but those kind of things can help you also on exam day. But I want to get to this other Q&A that's been here forever. Okay. An anonymous attendee, it's been here so long, I don't know if you're here anymore, but asked a great question. They said, we love how you're going over the score reports, detail. Can you do that for everybody? This is a service BarMax should offer. If you failed the bar exam using BarMax, this is a service that BarMax does offer, a 30-minute free consultation with an instructor. We take it quite seriously if you use BarMax and you were not successful, because we want you to be successful with our products. So we give you a free 30-minute consultation with an instructor. It's not a normal tutoring session. It's even scheduled differently. Katie takes care of those. Make sure she has your email address. If you purchased BarMax, back in October or whenever, and did not, or last year sometime, and did not succeed on the February bar, because we will do that score consultation with you. It will be me, Matthias, or Melissa. We're the three doing it right now this cycle. to sit there and walk through your score report and come up with a strategy for you. Okay. If you are not a BarMax student, you can still do that on the phone with a rep. Someone can help you look at your score report and figure out what the best strategy for you is going to be. Even the owner of the company, Mayron, does some of those. Co-owner and founder and CEO. He's great. You see his name on the emails, but he really is. I mean, he's the kind of guru who started it all, right? And he'll talk to some of you, and Jess, who's like his right arm, will talk to some of you, other people on our staff who are not BarMax tutors, instructors right now, but very knowledgeable about the bar exam. Someone will talk to you through your score report. So yes, we do offer that service. And it's the 30-minute face-to-face Google Meet meeting, I think, or no, it's a Zoom meeting. If you failed with BarMax. Okay, so we take that one seriously. How many months do I suggest studying for the bar generally for repeat takers? Now, I had one side conversation with somebody who gave me a score, and we decided together in the course of this webinar that he's going to aim for February because his score was more on that low range, like the lower one I showed, and he's going to make some adjustments to study strategies. So for you, Don asked this using his name, Don. So I want to encourage you to look at your overall score and decide whether you need a really comprehensive plan. Because if you need something more comprehensive, I like to say 4 months, and if your life obligations make it so that you can't do 8 blocks a week, then make it 5 months. So 5 or even 6, use the extended study plan and spread it out over more time. So now for people who are coming in and, like already, they just got their JD, they did pretty well in law school, they scored high on the LSAT. There are people who can study for the bar exam in 6 weeks and pass using BarMax because our materials are streamlined. Good for them. Yay. Right. But if that's not you, you still deserve to be a lawyer, right? Like the ability to take the bar exam and the ability to be a careful, diligent, competent, ethical lawyer are not very correlated. They're just not. So we want you to find success too, even if you had a low score or are a retaker. So you need to come up with a strategy that considers your personal obligations and your time constraints. I did post in chat that extended study plan, and I want you guys to download it. If you can't find it or download it, or you're on your phone or whatever, write to support@testmaxprep.com and ask for it. Even if you're taking July and you're past the dates on that plan, you could still look and say, hey, I know I need more essays. What are some good essays for me to do? Just get the plan and look at it and adapt it to your situation if you are taking July. But if you're taking February and you're saying, when should I start? October-ish is a good time, okay? Depending on your situation. Any thoughts? This is an interesting one from Julio. I'm waiting until 2026 when NCBE releases the updated bar exam. Don was the last student. This is Julio. Not all jurisdictions are going to switch at once. So if you know that you're taking in Missouri, which is I think, was it Missouri or was it Kansas?
I think it's Kansas.
It's Kansas. Kansas, put its hand in the air and said, we will do this the minute it's available. And I see I see arguments for it. We're working on materials now, to streamline our outlines. There are fewer rules to memorize, but it's more a test of legal skills. So fewer rules to memorize, more a test of legal skills. I had one student, I wrote about her in the article recently, Leah, who had a processing disorder. And part of the problem for her with the bar exam was jumping from subject to subject. And they're going to have like 8 little questions in a row on the same fact pattern, maybe adding more information. Okay, here's the statute. What do you need to ask the client? That kind of thing. So there are some people, I said, yeah, you would have passed that one without an accommodation, but for the current bar exam, she needed an accommodation. So it's going to be a different kind of exam. Is it going to be easier? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be easier or harder. I think it's going to be more representative of legal skills with less arcane memorization. So it's got that going for it. But if you don't know when your jurisdiction is going to switch, like, for example, if you have to take New York, I wouldn't count on 2026 because we really don't know when NCBE is really going to have that exam at a point that a lot of states are comfortable switching. And when states change their bar exam in the slightest, they go through a whole bureaucratic process. I mean, they convene committees and, state government is not, the Roadrunner and the old cartoons, meet, fast. No. So who knows? So there are things to consider. And then you say, I have a full-time job and other obligations. I can practically devote 1 to 3 hours a day to study. Honestly, 3 hours a day would be plenty for the 4-month, for the 4 or 5 month plan. So, and again, if you come in already with a high bank of knowledge, a high bank of skills, you could do it in a little less. I mean, it just depends where your starting point is in terms of facility with the exam. Sorry, dogs.
I also would just chime in that, the national conference is saying, yeah, we're going to release examples. You're going to have, information, blah, blah, blah. I mean, when they decided to add Civ Pro to the bar exam, they released 30 questions. That is not enough to really practice with, right? So
no, it was 16. I know because I took the bar exam that year.
There you go.
16 questions.
So I would say, for me, I would say like just I would take it sooner rather than later, but at a minimum, I would not say like, hey, I'm going to wait till this other exam comes out to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, especially if you want to be a lawyer, right? Like, come on, achieve your dream, dude. Anyway, I've got Heather here who said that she got a 253 solid score, is in a jurisdiction where she needs 266. She said, I really want to push forward and retake. That's your answer right there, because you've got the momentum, you've got the drive, the score is not terrible, it seems realistic. Now you said, I did self-study and did not use any bar prep course. And that may have been a financial decision on your part. I want you to know that BarMax is pretty affordable compared to the other BarMax bar prep programs. But, if money's really, really tight and you can't do a bar prep program, we do have the MBE question bank. Buy the questions, do them open book with whatever bar materials you can get your hands on. And I know this is kind of counterproductive of me as a BarMax rep. I'm trying to sell BarMax. I think our program's great. But if you can't do that, then pass the bar, use some materials, have some outline, okay? Some condensed outline. And, ours is only available as part of our program. Have some condensed outline and do a lot of practice questions. There are more practice questions. Again, we have them all, but there's a select set available on the NCBE website. And if you want to just purchase the question bank from us, you can, and then you get more MBE questions. You don't get the essays though. And there's only certain ones available for free at NCBE. So what I'm saying is do lots of past practice questions. I think it would be more comfortable for you with InReach more easily if you just buy BarMax and are able to walk through it. I said, hey, we have lectures, but really some of them are terrific. This began with Mayron persuading a bunch of his professors at Harvard to record these lectures for him. He and I both went to Harvard, and he had cooler professors than I did. Well, no, I had one really cool one. Actually, two. But they're not in BarMax. One of them is busy being a senator. Looking at you, Warren. Anyway, she was a great professor, and she taught me secure transactions, which would explain why I'm such a nerd there. Anyway, off point, do get BarMax if you can. We will help you hit that 266 score. You are driven. You can do it.
Okay, I think that's everything that I see in the Q&A. Do you see one that I don't?
No, we have one student who's taking California. We will be talking about how to read a California score report when we do kind of another version of this coming up for our California students. And you also had a question about the MPRE, and I answered that. What is the title of the open book method office hour? Okay, write this down. Open book bar exam study. It's on the TestMax YouTube page if you're not a BarMax student, and it's in the office hours page if you are a BarMax student. And Matthias is going to teach that method again in just an office hour coming up on May 8th. So there will be a live session where he goes through that again, teaches it his way. He's very like step by step by step. You do it this, but hey, he has a lot of students who are successful. So no, you could watch his or you could watch mine. Either way, as long as you're not just watching the video, but then you're also applying the method. That's it. Oh, if we were only a few points away, what's the best way to study? LaTanya, good question. If you did not turn in essays, turn in essays. If your MPT score is lower than whether that's 50 for New York or 4 for a lot of jurisdictions or whatever passing is for your jurisdiction, then practice MPTs. Go after your weaknesses and do open book bar exam study for MBE questions, and then later do timed practice tests. Those are the best ways to study. And if you're only a few points off, there may be some areas of law where you feel very comfortable. Do not listen to lectures again. Do not just blindly review outlines if those are the areas you're comfortable. Focusing from the questions, and we have them all in BarMax, is the best way to study. What time on the 8th? Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to remember this. It will be in your BarMax app soon. I can check my calendar while Jen tells us more about our brains.
Okay, I will just super quickly say, if you, whatever you can control will about the day of will help with your anxiety. So, one thing that I always tell folks is for that day of the exam, think about like what's going to help you. Can you lay out your, outfit the night before? Can you have a backup plan for how you're going to get there? Like if I get up and I have a flat tire, I'm going to take a lift. And it sounds silly, but sometimes just knowing what you'll do, sort of worst case scenario, can really help alleviate that anxiety. Day of, think about, here's some things you can do. So one is box breathing, which is where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4. Just doing some deep breathing. You can also tense and then relax, which will help you to be a little bit more physically relaxed. I'm also a big fan of just getting up, going to the bathroom, washing your hands. And sometimes folks will say, oh my gosh, Jen, you don't understand. I cannot possibly lose, the time that it would take for me to get up and go, to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. I would so much rather that you lose some time because you got up and went to the bathroom than that you don't go and miss questions because you were anxious. Think about, and then I wanted to just super briefly talk about, learning disabilities. And so obviously I mentioned ADHD. You can also have things like just anxiety, which we talked about, can be classified as a learning disability if it interferes with your daily living. Also visual and auditory processing disorders. So in the old days, you might have heard visual processing disorders as dyslexia. Nowadays, it's often called visual processing disorders. Auditory processing disorders the same way. Here's the thing. Many folks are diagnosed with their learning disability as a kid. Many of us will get diagnosed in college. Some folks are going to get diagnosed in law school because a lot of these folks can kind of self-accommodate, right? They can just spend extra time reading, or they can spend extra time turning everything into flowcharts or whatever. And then when we get to the law school or the bar exam, those methods no longer work. So a lot of folks are figuring out either during bar prep or during law school that like, hey, actually, the way that I've been experiencing the world is not the way that everybody else has been experiencing the world. And so think about, there are things like difficulty with task initiation. So you've done everything you need to do to make your bar prep space comfy and happy, and you still can't get started with it. That might be ADHD. If you have time blindness, you have no idea how long something will take. That can be time blindness. If you don't,
which, speaking of which, is 2 hours. You and I both have it.
if you, tend to be a bad speller, you might have dyslexia. If you're disorganized, sometimes folks are like, I can remember something I hear so much better than something I read. Or sometimes you have difficulty expressing thoughts. Listen, here's the deal. A lot of folks have, concerns about, their is it fair for me to go get an accommodation? Yeah, right. Like if you need this to level the playing field, let's level that playing field. You deserve not just to function, but to function well. What are some of those accommodations that are possible? Extra time, a quiet room with fewer people, the ability to bring your medication in, maybe even a private room, the ability to get up and stretch, your ability to use voice to text. Let's say you have some physical issue, right? It's not a learning disability, but it's a physical issue like back pain. You can get an accommodation to bring in a back pillow or to have a low stool to like rest your feet on to alleviate back strain, or for carpal tunnel, they can give you extra time or allow you to use wrist braces or voice to text. If you've never been tested for a learning disability before, you're going to want to get tested. This can sometimes be costly or it can take time. So if you're hearing this and you're like, wow, Jen, that is really resonating for me. Okay, time to, think about, you might be somebody where we want you to take a break so that you can get tested and get some appropriate treatment. If you are ADHD, right, or you have some other situation that can be adequately medicated, but your doctor's going to need to tweak your meds some, sometimes what's going to happen is you're going to go get tested, and then there's going to be a period of trying to figure out the medication situation, in which case you might need a little extra time for that too. If it is a learning disability, a lot of times the educational psychologist who tests you will also make recommendations. If she doesn't, ask her to do so. Then you're going to apply with your board of bar examiners. Most examiners are going to ask for not just, the information that your doctor will provide. They're going to have a form for your doctor to provide as well. They'll ask for a narrative from you. When you look at that narrative, there are 4 things that the examiners need to know. What's your disability? I have diabetes. What symptoms does it cause? If my blood sugar is high, I can't think properly. If it goes low, I could pass out. It also makes me super thirsty and I have to use the restroom off. What accommodations are you seeking? I'm seeking the ability to have my, blood sugar monitor with me, to bring in jelly beans and, to have an extra cup of water, whatever it is, right? How are those accommodations going to fix your symptoms? Well, hey, if I have those things, I'm going to know whether or not my blood sugar is high or low. I can take the appropriate medication. I can eat my jelly beans, whatever it is you need. This is also a good time to address any potential weaknesses. So what I hear from people sometimes is, well, I didn't have accommodations in law school. Doesn't that mean I can't get them now? And the answer to that is no. If you've always had accommodations, like that's a no-brainer. But if you're just having accommodations now, but you can explain to the examiners why that's true, right? Like, hey, after I failed the bar exam, I thought maybe there's something going on and I went and got tested. That's what you're going to use that narrative for, is to explain, this is why I don't have a history of accommodations, because I didn't know until this happened. Or, hey, I was accommodated all through high school. And then when I got to college, I didn't feel like I needed it and I did okay. But then I needed them again in law school and I know I'm going to need them for the bar. So you can use that narrative to kind of address any of those potential perceived weaknesses in your request. And that's everything I've got.
Yeah. Somebody, Clara just posted a great point, and I put it in the blog post that went up today. Most states will require your documentation to be less than a year old. That means even if you had that comprehensive battery of tests, it's like takes 12 hours over the course of 2 days or something, that you got, a clear ADHD diagnosis when you were, 20 years old. And now it's 5 years later, you have to go through and get all that testing again. Possibly. Yeah, and depending on your state, you may need to show all of that all over again.
Yeah, definitely depending on the state, also depending on the disability. And there is some ongoing litigation around that, because it's they don't typically ask.
It is a huge burden.
Right. And they don't typically ask for those kinds of, like if you're blind, you don't have to go get an updated accommodation. So there's an argument that like, is this discriminatory to people who have sort of
right? Because ADD,
non-visible.
it doesn't go away. You just learn how to manage it while you're functioning in your life, but your brain is still your brain. You just, I don't know. I like ADD TikTok. Should I admit that?
Why not?
I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot. Not just TikTok.
And
I learn a lot from you too, Jen.
The other thing that sometimes people get surprised about is that the standard for the bar exam is a different standard than what is applied in school.
Yes.
So school, it's what is necessary to help you succeed. In the bar exam, it's what is necessary to allow you to show minimum competence. So that is another way that you can address that in your narrative.
And the other thing is that when you're dealing with your provider, you have to let them know this is what the exam is, because they don't know. It is 2 full days of testing. I have to sit there and write for 3 hours, and I will write on 6 different subjects with no transition time in between. I have to do 2 big complicated tasks that involve processing a lot of information. That's the MPT. And then I have to answer 100 multiple choice questions in the morning and 100 multiple choice questions in the afternoon. And the subjects are mixed the next day in a room with potentially, I don't know, a couple thousand of my closest friends, depending on what state you're in. That is very different than any other exam. There is nothing else in your life that will put you through that. Hazing. That was the kindest word. So it's a different kind of experience, and your provider needs to know that so that they know specifically, what extra time or what sort of a room accommodation or whatever that you might need. And you and your provider need to ask for the same thing. Please read that article. I actually co-wrote it with Lavanya Sabin, who is a real advisor when it comes to our students and disability accommodations. She is available for tutoring time, but also sometimes students will request just a couple of tutoring hours with Lavanya just to go through this and their own personal situation and get all their ducks in a row on the accommodation application. She did it for law students before she came to us, and she continues to do it, I'm grateful to say, for BarMax students now. So I want to thank everyone for being here tonight and just participating and making this webinar very interactive and great. And I wish you all the best with your upcoming bar exam.
Yes. Good luck. You don't need luck, you guys. You can totally do this. And my last minute advice would be, you guys have advantages that our first time takers don't have. You know what works for you. You know what doesn't work for you. You know what you did well on. You know what you didn't do well on. Take that. Don't be afraid to personalize what you're doing to what you need.
Yeah. And you have the advantage of you've been through it now. You know what you're going to face when you get there. There's a bunch of rookies in the room, but you'll know what you're going to face. And you can pace yourself, set yourself through it. You know what you need to do. So go plan your work your plan. We'll see you on the pass list.